Okay, let's talk. So ever since the prequel trilogy, this has been a thing that, I think depending on, again, what is Star Wars? What is the Force supposed to be? What does it mean to be a Jedi? There's a lot of questions in here, and Midichlorians, I think, is a cool jumping on point for different viewpoints.
Sure.
Right? So, to you, when you think about it, what are Midichlorians?
Midichlorians?
Yeah.
I mean, they're things that are in our blood. We learned that from episode 1.
They live in your blood.
And they essentially help you to connect to the Force,
Yeah.
right? Just because you have low or no midichlorians doesn't mean you have no connection to the Force, because everything's connected to the Force, right?
Mm-hmm.
It assists people, and it
seems,
helps, and it amplifies it.
Yeah, there
more,
seems
right?
to be a correlation to the more midichlorians you have, the stronger you can be, or the more potential you can reach. Something like that, right?
Something.
For the last Badonkagonk, we were kind of talking about, is the Jedi way the right way? And in that discussion, you get to this idea of the genetic lottery or the genetic curse of being a Jedi. What does it mean to be a Jedi? And a Jedi is someone that fills themselves with the Force so that the Force can have its will be done, right?
Sure. Okay.
You don't get to have a wife or a husband or a partner because that is something reserved for people that don't have the Force, right? Yeah. You are a servant. You sacrifice having those feelings so that you can live in the moment, right? I always think about what is it to be a Jedi, and I think of Qui-Gon Jinn.
Sure.
Be in the moment.
Yeah.
And use your instincts. That's the one thing he tells Anakin before he goes into pod race. And it's the reason that Anakin is so good at pod racing. He feels it, right?
He's not thinking about being a slave and his mom. He's in the moment right there. It's about the pod race, and he's got to win.
Yeah, use your gut. Right?
Sure.
That gut instinct.
Use that ramp, survive, don't die.
And it was when I was thinking about this topic, when I came across, it's kind of a fringe science, not real thing, but I was looking at this theory and I was like, I want to apply this to Star Wars, where people were talking about organisms in your your gut biome, right?
Okay.
You have not in your butt.
Your butt guy.
You have itches in your butt. You have glitches in droids. You have microscopic life forms that live in your gut. They help you digest, right? But we have this kind of thing where anxiety and certain instincts, you don't feel them here. You feel a headache here or you feel discombobulated here. But when you think of your instinct, you think of your gut. Isn't that weird?
I get what you mean.
It's kind of weird that you're just no, I have to do it. And it feels like it's coming from here. And I thought this really fun theory of someone saying, well, yeah, there's a lot of beings that live in there. Maybe they're thinking that you should do that too, and you can feel it down here. And I thought, well, that's silly. But you know what's fun to think about is that midichlorians are things that live inside your body, right? They allow you to connect to the Force and listen to the Force. And I kind of thought, when we were reviewing Light of the Jedi, right? The first book in the High Republic. There's this fantastic moment towards the beginning of the book where all the Jedi in the entire galaxy come together with one purpose and do something amazing.
Yeah. It's a great moment.
And it's a great moment. And you can apply that to a lot of different things. But when creatures come together, when consciousnesses come together, they can do great things.
Sure.
And I was kind of thinking, do you think that midichlorians, these individual beings, they live inside you? In episode 1, we have, the Gungan and the Naboo are a symbiont circle. One cannot live without the other. And what happens to one affects the other. So you have to work together to do it. And I started thinking, I wonder if Jedi are vessels in which that is happening. The individual Jedi forms a symbiont circle with midichlorians that live in their bloodstream. Specific individual creatures that work together, live together.
Sure.
And feel the Force. And I wonder if, it's because of that grouping that you have something like a Jedi. Individual people, like you say. Master Yoda talks to clones. You can use the Force to clear your mind. You can get rid of anxiety. You can do that yourself. But Jedi are like these groups of organisms.
Well, and there's non-Jedi that would have midichlorians too. It's not just if you're not a Jedi, you don't have midichlorians.
Yeah.
There's levels and stuff. And it kind of goes with you talking about the gut biome and is it bacteria that helps you to break down?
It's bacteria, it's fungi, it's a whole bunch of different stuff that helps you can't live without.
It helps you to break down stuff in your stomach and everything. So even having if it's not a symbiotic relationship necessarily, because there's different scales of how much it's not. It wouldn't be one for one like those birds and the rhinos or whatever, right? but having some kind of like, it's a microorganism that some people have, so they have better gut health. Having too much could be dangerous. Having too little could be dangerous.
If you don't have that, you can die.
Sure. So, like, looking at it in a sense like that, you could compare them to just microorganisms that live inside you, and some people just have more than others and stuff. Even if it's not a straight up like symbiotic relationship,
and if
like a creature,
exactly. But if 0.00001% of the galaxy, certain individuals are attuned to the Force, that might be true to smaller individuals. George Lucas, he had this treatment of the sequel trilogy where he wanted to go it was called like the Microverse, like he wanted to go small. And I've always been kind of fascinated / like, well, it's Lucas. You know what he does. He doesn't want to do more of the same. He wants to push it so far where people are like, I don't know. I think this is too much. That's what he does.
I want Godzilla and Clone Wars.
In fact, he recently came out and said, like, the sequel trilogy, it's okay, but they didn't push it enough here when it comes to filmography, when it comes to, like, what you can do.
Technology in general, right?
But also he might, I was going to go a whole different direction because that's what he likes to do. But I was really, like, kind of obsessed just for a couple of days of, like, like, I wonder if when it comes to microorganisms, certain ones of those must also be attuned to the Force.
Sure.
And that must be midichlorians that live in your blood.
I wonder too if there's a connection. Like in episode 1 you have where they mention the midichlorian counts, and it's like I haven't seen a count like this, higher than Master Yoda, right? Yeah. And you were saying about
20,000.
Like smaller, smaller scale and all kind of stuff, but then I thought about smaller Yoda. And I'm like, I wonder if what if midichlorian wise, however the counts work, like the count is exactly the same as like Mace Windu.
Yeah.
But because Yoda's like a quarter his size, less blood, less mass as a whole, it's a higher midichlorian count per blood, per square inch, per whatever and stuff too. Yeah. And like I wonder if like smaller creatures can be more attuned to the Force in different ways because of that too.
I don't know. I mean, it's implied that Vader, once he lost limbs, actually became weaker in terms of his overall potential.
Sure,
right?
Yeah.
Like he lost parts of his body, thus doesn't have as many midichlorians these days.
Well, like if it's in your blood, then you're losing limbs. There's blood in your limbs, so you're going to lose some of your midichlorians.
Yeah.
There's also nothing that necessarily says that midichlorians replenish like blood cells or anything.
Yeah.
So like, could they just be in you, and what's in you is in you?
Yeah.
And that's all you get.
It might be.
I don't know.
I was kind of like obsessed with this idea just for a little bit because we have even in the Mandalorian, right? Like they want Grogu. He's gonna be the donor. We need his blood. We can theorize if that's at all connected to Palpatine. You know?
Yeah.
And
Plagueis and all
Palpatine.
that kind of stuff that they
we
talk
also,
about.
when it comes to midichlorians in Episode 3, Palpatine says he could use midichlorians to create life, right?
Yeah.
So I just think that it's interesting, the symbiotic relationship and how does that develop. Like, we have to take Jedi when they're very young, right?
Yeah.
Generally. When you're not, you have emotion and you have life experience and stuff, and that can make someone more focused on themselves or up here, not down here, not using your instinct, but using the Force for what you want. Or other people might call that using it in a dark manner, right?
Sure, yeah.
Like putting your will over others, not being this kind of vessel. Jedi are meant to be vessels for the Force, and they're filled with these thing called midichlorians. And I've always pushed back on the idea that midichlorians are the Force. I think Episode 1 clearly states that's not the case.
Sure.
They are organisms, an organism just like you, that can feel it. And I think that I just wonder if there's some type of thing there that because you've grouped organisms together into this one being, that's why a Jedi or someone that's Force sensitive is Force sensitive in the first place, because it's a group of beings together that can attune to the Force, as opposed to an individual.
And if you're okay with like there's different species that have a better attunement to the Force than others,
there are,
right? What is it? The Miraluka, I think it is. That is a blind race, right? And like they see through the Force, basically, right? So like their species just kind of has a natural attunement overall, even if not all of them become Jedi.
Yeah,
they kind of have a sense through the Force. You have the Jar Jar's girlfriend. Remember that race, right? The Bardottans. They have their connection to the Force, and even the Night Sisters too have it. But it's different. But is there midichlorians used in those ways too, similar to the way the Jedi
it wouldn't surprise
would use
me. Heir to the Empire, where they introduced Grand Admiral Thrawn in the old legends, they had the Elsalmari, which were these yellow lizards that actually repelled the Force. And the reason they did that was because on their planet, there were predators that used the Force to hunt.
Sure.
It's completely natural. They just have this magic feeling of being able to find these things. So the Elsalmari evolved, maybe with their own gut,
instinct or whatever,
to repel it, right?
Or they ate midichlorian heavy creatures that then gave them. I don't know. Like, could that be a thing?
I don't know.
It's kind of goes with the idea of like, could you, if Anakin lost all of his blood, could he get more midichlorians in other ways, right? If you can use midichlorians to create life, can you transfer midichlorians to someone else? Could you buff your connection to the Force or anything too?
Can you take Anakin's blood and put it into someone with the same blood type and make them stronger?
Yeah. Or someone who doesn't have Force powers, really. Like Shmi, right?
Yeah.
She doesn't really have any Force powers, it seems. So if you gave her a blood, like say they're the same blood type, if you blood transfused into her, would she have a better connection to the Force? Would that transfer over, or does that not work that way?
The reason I'm going to say no is I think that it needs to be something that it is a symbiont circle, right? The Naboo and the Gungans have lived together on Naboo for a very long time. I don't know if you take one off the planet and put them with another species that they're going to have that symbiont circle the same exact way, right? It's going to have different systems and prejudices and bigotries and stuff like that, whereas the Naboo, they kind of have this other understanding together. Maybe that's the same thing when it comes to midichlorians and the specific Jedi. The way that Anakin uses and bonds with his midichlorians might be different than Obi-Wan's or Plo Koon's or Mace Windu,
Sure.
Like, maybe Mace Windu's midichlorians wouldn't get along with Anakin. You'd try to do that, and they might die,
Yeah.
Because that's not how that works. I think that if you take this idea, this idea of mutual symbiotic living within the Jedi, you can apply that to the almost a fractal nature of the story of Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are the Jedi to the galaxy? What were the failures of the Jedi right before the Empire fell? Like, in terms of a symbiotic relationship, the Jedi are meant to they give up all of this stuff so that you can have this stuff, right?
Sure.
It's meant to be that a Jedi wanders around and does the will of the Force. The will of the Force is that people come together and love each other and have have harmony in the galaxy, right? Like that is, I believe that's the true will of the Force.
It's kind of more of like what we hear from like a little bit of the High Republic stuff that we've heard,
a little bit.
Or even kind of similar to Tales of the Jedi and some stuff what we've seen from that, where it's like they're coming here to help. Like they weren't sent by the Republic for this or that. They were coming to assist and help the galaxy.
And then you have this enigma of a concept called the balance of the Force. What does that mean? Like, I think that there really might be something when it comes to symbiotic circles, thinking about the balance of the Force, right? Like Luke says in The Last Jedi, like, it's vanity to think the Jedi are all the light. They're not. There's light, there's dark. You need both of them to cycle, right?
Sure.
And I like to think about that in terms of what it is to be a Jedi and what it is to take that code. Why does that code exist? Because what happens without the Jedi code is that you have these people of incredible power pop up, and if they are just left to like, I will just take whatever I want, they're gonna
take over.
They're gonna
take whatever they want.
They're going to oppress others.
Yeah.
They're going to take from others, and that's not the way it should be.
And then you start getting wars between like these, whatever they've taken. They're fighting for more territory or whatever it is. So,
ancient Jedi texts and ancient Jedi code states that like we, the privilege, if you want to say it, should, now that we can recognize and find where that privilege is, take away privileges. Like compassion is supposed to be a mandate of the Jedi, but not individual love. Like I'm supposed to care about your well-being, but not necessarily love you. Like,
Sure.
I love my wife. I would do anything for my wife. I would do bad things for my wife.
Sure.
A Jedi is not meant to do that, because when a Jedi chooses to do bad things, it can do those bad things becomes catastrophes.
It becomes their bad things that they could do can be so much worse than what just a regular person could do, right?
Yeah, exactly. So then you have these kind of empty vessels. They're empty because they want to fill themselves with the Force and do its will. But then they're like, okay, well, what's the right thing to do? I mean, that's a question that every philosophy, every religion in the entire world of our recorded history has tried to answer, and some of them are closer than others, I think, but no one has the right answer. And you can put this on the Jedi as well. The Jedi Code is not the right thing, but it might be the closest to the right thing we can do, because we do have a symbiont circle in the light and the dark. To be able to have balance, you have to have both. And to be able to have both, they have to balance themselves out.
Yeah.
Right? So I always kind of thought, isn't it crazy that, the Jedi develop for, thousands of years, and they get to the point where they're like, we do the will of the Force, but we let these guys tell us what it is, i.e. the Senate or politicians.
The Republic, right?
The government, right?
They join too much with the Republic, and the balance of the Force falls off because they're not on their own.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, you could look at it as like, well, the balance of the Force wasn't like, well, there's too many Jedi and only one Sith. It's, well, the Jedi that's supposed to be helping to balance things are actually falling off balance themselves. So we must rid everything of that, and then that's how we fall into the Purge. We get into Luke Skywalker, and we start transitioning into a new Jedi Order that's not following what the Republic says and what the Senate wants, right? Because now you're following people's ambitions and what their dreams are. And sometimes you have senators who are like, oh, well, we see that with Count Dooku, kind of the reason why he falls and stuff too, right? From Tales of the Jedi. So it really does feed really well into like, why is the balance of the Force out of whack? Well, maybe the Jedi have strayed away from where the Old Republic and the High Republic Jedi used to be, and now we've fallen too much into the Republic, right?
Tales of the Jedi shows us Mace Windu that just like, I just wait until the Council says something. The Council tends to wait until the Senate says something, and that's what I do. And Dooku's like, that's not what we should be doing.
No. Like,
we should be using our instinct. And then he trains Qui-Gon Jinn, the quintessential Jedi. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And in even more so with that, like, we should have seen during the Clone Wars, it should have been Jedi on the Republic and on the Separatist side.
Yeah.
Both. Because heroes on both sides, there's villains on both sides, but instead the Jedi are like, we're on the Republic side, and they're not trying to balance things.
Yeah.
So really the balance of the Force doesn't just mean the light and the dark. It can also just be like, well, the light's out of balance.
Exactly.
And we need to fix that.
And not to take the agency from the Sith. The Sith are brilliant, right? They have this war with the Jedi. They lose because they're playing on equal terms. I'm really powerful. I'm a really good lightsaber guy. All right, the Jedi have won. And the Sith are like, well, fuck, we got to change the way that we do things. We're not going to weaponize our incredible power and our incredible lightsaber fighting, because Palpatine is incredibly powerful, and he's the best lightsaber fighter that's ever existed, and that's not how he does things.
And he probably couldn't have taken all the Jedi. If he just went in there fighting, he probably would have lost. Right?
But what he does is he weaponizes the not privileged, their thoughts and feelings and wants and desires and fears, all the things the Jedi aren't able to have. He weaponizes those against the Jedi, and the Jedi have they have nothing. They think they're doing this great thing by sacrificing their own identity, but because they have no identity, they can't really say like, well, what's the right thing to do here, Which I think is the big difference between the High Republic and the Republic we see in the prequel trilogy.
Sure.
And I always thought it was really interesting that the Force, whatever, the vergence of the Force, Anakin Skywalker, isn't born in the Republic where the Jedi can find him and train him the Jedi way.
Sure.
He's born on Tatooine, the lowest of the low. He's born to a slave woman, a woman that is at the absolute bottom of the galaxy. We talked about this, and it'll be up a reaction to Andor, the finale. But Cassian is at the absolute bottom of the rung, right? There are certain rungs when it comes to the Empire. Cassian's down here. Anakin is born in a galaxy all the way down here. And I think that was done on purpose. If the Force has agency, a will, and we know it does, I think the Force wanted a Jedi or a Force user that did love.
Sure.
That did have a mother that loved him. That did have people around him, right? Like, it put him as far away as you can.
Sure. It's kind of the opposite of Dooku, right? Like, he was born into a royal family. Like,
exactly.
I guess he didn't know until later, right?
Yeah.
But he was.
Yeah.
Whereas he was a count. He has money. He has all this stuff.
I mean, Qui-Gon says if he was born in the Republic, we would have found him.
Yeah.
Right?
So, like, with Anakin, you have him at the bottom.
Yeah.
He learns to enjoy the smallest stuff, but still, like, it's about caring and, helping people and all that kind of stuff, sure. But, he learns to love.
My mom said that the worst thing about this galaxy is no one helps each other.
Yeah.
He's like the sweet little boy that, if maybe left alone, would have done things might have happened a different way, right?
Sure.
Like, he might have been the actual person to guide the Jedi because he does love. Like, there's the reason that all the Jedi can't do what Anakin can do, or, in terms of, like, emotional maturity, is because the risk is too great. So no one gets it, right?
Sure.
But Anakin should have gotten it. And his whole life, he craves it because, he was too old and they weren't able to stamp out that love that he has.
Sure.
And the Sith, Palpatine, what have they been doing for 1,000 years? They've been using love. They've been using desire. They've been using all that stuff as their weapon for 1,000 years. He does it there, right?
Yeah.
It's sad. Like, I like to think about what was the way it was supposed to happen. Obviously, that's a moot point because the way it happened, right?
Yeah.
And can you say that the will of the Force wasn't done? I don't know.
No, I get what you mean. Yeah.
But I like to think that there was this initial, you could call it magical, you could call it natural response where the Force realizes what's happening and creates a vergence where no one can find you. Unfortunately, Qui-Gon Jinn, the one guy trained by Count Dooku, to trust your gut, trust your instincts. Don't worry about what the council says. The council's like, you can't train this boy. It's really dangerous. And he's like, no, I feel that this is important.
Yeah.
Like, this guy's a vergence in the Force, and I'm going to do it. I don't give a shit. Like, if more Jedi had done that in the lead up to it, we might not have had what happened to Anakin, right?
Sure.
He might not have, been forced to feel so alone while in the company of 10,000 wizards.
Yeah, there's so many things with that, with him finding Anakin. Like, if Anakin wouldn't have been found by Qui-Gon and all that, what would have happened with that and what would he have become? But also, if Qui-Gon wouldn't have died,
We wouldn't have died. Yeah.
what differences would have happened there?
Sure.
Had he been led by Qui-Gon,
Yeah.
would he have thought differently? Would he have done things differently? Would he have been more in tune with something else instead of going the route he did? And I don't know. Maybe.
Sure.
I mean, Dave and George talk about how important that is, that he would have had a father figure in Qui-Gon and all that. So that seems to be very important too. But I don't know what the alternative is of what if they didn't have to escape Naboo and crash land basically on a desert planet that was run by the Hutts because they didn't know where else to land,
Sure.
So I don't know.
And then the second part of this that I like to dive deep when it comes to these things, like Anakin, if the Force tried to hide him from the Jedi, it didn't work out, but they at a certain point you're like, interesting, because then Anakin's children, born out of love, which, like I said, I think that the Force placed Anakin with a slave mother because, just try to think about that situation. The only thing that really relies on you is this baby, right? Like, because you don't have responsibilities, you don't have a life, you don't have your freedom, but you do have a baby, right? Which can be the ultimate form of love. And then out of the love of Anakin and Padme, which is something that Jedi would say, no, you can't do that, it's dangerous. The Force says, yes, here are twins. Luke and Leia are born out of that. You have the great balancing of the Force. Vader rejects the dark side and accepts his son, right?
Sure.
Like, I love saying that a Jedi didn't beat Darth Vader. His son reached out to him, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the will of the Force. And then if you bring the sequels into it, which I know some people don't want to, but I love to, you still have that balancing the Force. It's significant that the Sith did what they did. They wiped out the Jedi. They took over the galaxy, 20 years of oppression, right? And then Vader tosses the Emperor over here. He explodes with energy, and we know that it doesn't necessarily stop him.
No.
He's dead, but he's obsessed with death and life.
Yeah, we have the Anakin thing, the Plagueis stuff. We have all that information.
What does he do? From what I understand that the Mandalorian is telling me, what Episode 3 has told me, he uses Midi-chlorians to bring that back, right? To do something. They do things called strand casts where he has artificial sons, which is the opposite of what Shmi went through. Shmi, I carried him, I gave birth to him, I raised him. Whereas Palpatine is using science and dark magic and cloning and stealing midichlorians from others to create his own body offspring, right? We learned that he's trying to create a new body so that he himself can inhabit it, right? Like
Yeah.
he is the ultimate dark sider. He's the ultimate selfish person.
Yeah, and we know like he's made some
Yeah.
things and like they failed, right?
Yeah.
They're not working quite right or they're aging too quickly.
Yeah.
He's destroying these bodies and stuff. So
But then what happens next? One of his strand casts that he's like, he doesn't have any force ability. I don't care about this stuff. It's garbage. That garbage goes off, finds a woman, falls in love. Rey is born, and where's Rey? She's the lowest of the low.
Yeah.
She's down in the desert. She's scrubbing parts for money, for portion bread, Like, despite her connection to Palpatine, like, the Force is almost, in a way, like, if Palpatine is mocking Jedi by showing how much better he is with the lightsaber and how much more powerful he is with the Force, but then, like, that's not how I defeat you. The Force mocks him back in a way. It's
Sure.
this great pendulum. Like, whenever you try to balance something, you have things sway back and forth and back and forth. And just because Anakin decided, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to love my son, it doesn't mean that this is over. I think it's
Sure.
vanity to think that the Skywalkers fix everything. But they start that balance and that pendulum swings back, right? And now we have Rey, who was no one, who could have been Emperor, is now a Skywalker. And then I'm really excited to see where that could go.
Sure.
What that means. Maybe it's about the Jedi should be no more, and maybe the Skywalkers should be something.
Yeah.
I think that would be really cool. But I like thinking back that it all comes back to the Midichlorians.
Sure.
And the symbiont circle that we have in different systems.